children's status is nearer to be realized. Now, the work about the form of the institution to protect human rights, the proposal has been on the table to transform the Office of Public Defender into the Institute of Human Rights. That work has been put on pause, not because it is unimportant, but because the necessary policy assessment seemed incomplete when I looked at it. Because better days are here and much better days are coming.
Thank you very much. Mr. Bailey, let me bring you in. I don't want you to be so quiet at this forum at all. Andre Earl, attorney at law, has a program on Radio Jamaica 94 FM called Balancing Justice. I think the role of the Justice Ministry might very well be a difficult one at this point in time. How do you balance justice within the context of what we're discussing here today, human rights? Because, of course, as we've heard, we have the rights, but we also have the responsibilities. What is the role of your office in this?
So one of the things that's important to note is that the Ministry of Justice has retained portfolio responsibility for the administration of justice. So regardless of the situation, he's ensured that fairness is at play. Regardless of it, if you're looking at a state party versus an individual, what is fair to this situation? And he always ensures that fairness is of paramount importance to the situation. So in terms of balancing justice, justice is a part of our portfolio responsibility. It's about fairness, full stop. That's about it.
And speaking about fairness, let us bring Diane Gordon Harrison back in, because of course, Mrs. Gordon Harrison, if we talk about human rights, we also have to talk about the constitutional rights of our children and how that their human rights fit into that framework. What concerns, if any, do you have about that?
Well, and that is with the Charter of Fundamental Rights and Freedoms, the new Chapter 3, I certainly was very pleased that for the very first time we had children's rights being referenced there with great specificity. So that is a huge recognition, and it really is well for how we apply and defend these rights in the matters that we represent children in before the courts. As I said, when they're in conflict with the law and we have to be arguing before tribunals for the fair administration of justice, it's certainly very useful to have a constitutional provision to guide you and to bind the court. Where do we have concerns, however? In the day-to-day execution of duties, though we have broad understanding across the various stakeholder institutions, there is still a deficit in terms of that individual personal buy-in of every single representative within those institutions. And Minister Fort referenced it when she spoke about having to go to the top if you want a certain reaction. So we see that as one of the greatest challenges, because where you have, for example, a very real and positive discussion, let's say with the Commissioner of Police, and we're all a diadem, we understand the principles. We have next week a situation that may arise at a guard room, police officer who is on beat duty, or let's say, for example, a police officer with pepper spray on a child, for instance, which demonstrates in very living color that there are still persons who hold key responsibilities within institutions that aren't understanding how they are to actively demonstrate that they're applying the best interest principle. And I single the police out, not because I'm vilifying them, but certainly they provide a very active example for how we see rights being denigrated sometimes, even when we understand what ought to be. So that to me remains a great challenge, not just with the police, but in various sectors, in the education sector, health sector, or correctional services, you name it. We have to understand that every single individual must understand the role they play in preserving the integrity of how children's rights have to be actualized, protected, and defended.
All right, and I see Minister Fort, you seem as if you want to respond, so go right ahead.
The work of government has to be done at every level of government. The work of government has to be done at every level of government. And everyone who desires to work in government must understand that. part of what the Ministry of Legal and Constitutional Affairs has to do is intra-government legal education to ensure that everyone who represents the face of government understands the responsibilities that they have to discharge. And so it is true that we get it right at the high orienting level. When you get the heads of institutions, everyone is on the same page. But where the rubber hits the road is where we have dips. And I think that anecdotally, I hear many say, you know, government is the place to work. It guarantees a paycheck every month. It guarantees a pension if you are there long enough. But for a long time, government has grown idle in many places. And people come to work, and they really are not discharging the work of the people. And I come from a school of thought which says that government has no other responsibility independent of the people. And so everything that is done must be done in the public's interest and in the best interest of our people. And we've recognized that, unfortunately, we have now institutionalized cultures in some institutions where matters have to be escalated to the top. We cannot run any country like that. But I'm excited progress. You know, one of the first things to getting to problem solving is an awareness that the problem actually exists. And an acceptance by those who have responsibility for the solution that they have to be part of it. So I don't only see the challenges, I really see the work that is in progress, and I come to measure progress at all times.
I just quickly wanted to point
Sure.
out, Minister Fort has expressed that she's excited about where we're going. I've seen also the development of an appetite for learning in the government service. Even as it concerns our JCF officers, they want to ensure that the laws that they're implementing it as was intended and as written. I have this real life example of, so the Ministry of Justice would have instituted an order in respect of the Dangerous Drugs Act, giving certain rights to the Rastafarian community as it concerns cultivation of marijuana. And as a part of that, the JCF would have reached out to the ministry asking for a sensitization session with them so that they are aware of what exactly are the parameters of law, how exactly should they go about exercising or imposing the restrictions of the law. So I'm happy to see that there's an appetite for learning now.
Just to add, because I will have to go soon, so we've passed a new Bail Act. And I think during the process of passage, it was one of the most contentious pieces of legislation because we have introduced a pre-charge bail regime. But just to tell you how we're shifting, before the appointed day notice is published, which will bring the law into effect, we have begun to train the people who are to implement the law. And we had a training with the justices of the peace. Law are deciding officials who grant bail out of court. And coming up will be the training with the police. So we're making important shifts as we recognize how to do it differently for better outcomes. And standardly, no, the approach is to ensure that all who are involved in implementing the laws will be part of the training and not that it be taken for granted that a new law has been promulgated and everyone is on board. But since the police have been named as the usual suspect with concerns around right, I just want to commend the Office of the Independent Commissioner of Investigations. You know, the unfortunate culture is that only bad news makes the news. But every day, the INDECOM receives complaints, is present on the scene to address issues that are raised. And they have been working quietly, and sometimes probably too quietly, to ensure that the treatment by the security forces meet the standard set out in law. So I want to commend Commissioner Faulkner and his team for the work that they are doing, as I also commend the new public defender and her predecessors in office and the entire team, our children's advocate. The work is going on. It's just that, we have many challenges, and sometimes you address one and another angle of another one show up. But Jamaicans can be proud that government is responsive. Issues do not arise and then they fall away. Steps are taken in many areas to address them. You may not hear about the solutions as publicly as you have heard about the problems, but work is being done. And so as we commemorate International Human Rights Day, Jamaica is by no means the least among the apostles in this area.
Thank you very much.
Sorry, Madam Moderator, if I could follow on very quickly, because Minister referenced Hugh, head of the Independent Commission, and I too just want to say that when I think of what you've been talking about all day, coordinated and sustainable efforts, speaking of the investigations that, Mr. Faulkner, through his team, has to respond to routinely, we have seen where a lot of these transgressions sometimes impact children. And like that office, the Office of the Children's Advocate, both has the legal responsibility, the lawyers to do it, and the investigative capacity to interact with transgressions that affect children's rights. And so in terms of that collaborative and sustained effort of institutionalizing responses, we have a common system now where if there is a use of force that he's investigating that involves the police, and we find that children are involved, then we try to do a shared investigation where my investigators are partnering with he's dealing with his remit, and I'm dealing with mine, because we're looking for different things from the same set of circumstances. And as I said, one of the very admirable ways I think, and again, Minister touched on it, successive administrations have seen the importance of children's rights, is that even though the title is Children's Advocate, it's somewhat of a misnomer, because there is actually that legal ability, when we see the violations, to institute actions in court with a view to really recovering damages by those who are in authority that have transgressed these rights of children. So I really just wanted to say that is, I think, a very live example of good work that's happening, progress that's being made, and we don't necessarily go on the air to say, oh, we're investigating this and this is what happened, because many of them are sensitive investigations as well. But as we pause to reflect on how far we have come as a country, just to say that the body of evidence is there that reflects the sustainable efforts and the work that's been put in to advance this issue of human rights.
Just a moment,
all right,
please. Just one moment.
Oh, go right
Dan, I'm
ahead.
so hurt that you didn't mention the Office of the Public Defender. in
I
that scheme
just
of
meant in terms of
arrangement.
running to the scene of the crime.
So much so that before we step into your arena, we telephone you to
I
say,
like this quarrel. This is a quarrel about the progress. I like it.
to say, do you mind if we step in and assist here? Or we reach out to you and tell you that we're about to do this. Would you like to participate? So yes, it's all round.
It's collaborative, and of course, being a guest of the public defender, no affront was made.
And you want to be
But-
invited
Yes.
again?
But I merely was referencing the investigative part of what we do. But we do collaborate in public education.
So this
and
is
other
this is family
institutions.
quarrel.
Madam Moderator, don't think that ministers are exempt from being hauled up by these office holders. They don't do it publicly. But I'm telling you that if there is a concern which has to be immediately brought to the attention of the minister, these leaders are not afraid to let us know, and they do demand the appropriate action. So I think Jamaicans can feel proud that in spite of the many challenges, we do have a cadre of professionals that are committed to serving them well.
All Right. And I'm going to walk the floor now. I'm going to come to you, Dr. Amenia, in just a while, but let me go to Mr. Faulkner, because since you're getting all of these compliments, I wanted to get a sense of how it is that you handle issues having to do with the security forces, because they do have human rights.
Indeed, indeed. Thank you, Madam Moderator, and thanks to the Office of the Public Defender for inviting us. But let me just indicate that what we can observe is that the protection of human rights is not restricted to a silo. It has to be a network approach. So INDECOM, while we are investigating whether an officer did not carry his task up to the force guidelines, whether there should be discipline, whether there should be a charge, if they are children, we have to contact the children's advocate, because there may be the civil aspects of the circumstances. So that is why it has to be a network, and we work from time to time with the various agencies, public defender, etc. And just to add, to demonstrate again that it has to be a network, a coming together of the various agencies, we, INDECOM, we were a voice on behalf of the children who were given a correctional order, not for committing a crime, but for being deemed uncontrollable. And we believe we added with the voice of the Children's Advocate and other institutions, and that particular section of the Child Care and Protection Act was remedied, and it demonstrates to us that if we work as a team, we'll get more done. But my final point, with your kind leave, Madam Moderator, is that I'll ask the Honorable Minister to bear in mind Section 15 of the Corrections Act. Currently, the Corrections Act, Minister, it permits members of the correctional department, the officers, where someone is escaping from custody, to engage lethal response, whether that person is armed or not. And we believe with the coming into being of the 2011 Charter of Fundamental Rights and Freedom, which reinforces the right to life, I believe a revision is needed, and maybe with some urgency, Minister. Thank you.
Minister, you have lots of homework.
And I so regret that I must take my leave. But responses must be proportionate. They must be proportionate, all right? The Corrections Act is actually under review. You may or may not be aware of it, but I'm happy to take a look at this specific provision. But I would also say to anyone listening who is contemplating escaping custody, no bother with it. And anybody who is trying to aid and abet it, no bother with it. All right? No, the beautiful occasion is being broadcast. And I know that people are hearing in many different places, eh? No bother with it, right? I don't understand why everybody just so, you know, nobody wants to be subject to authority, right? We don't, when you are deprived of your liberty as an exception, whether you have committed an offense and you're serving sentence, or there is sufficient cause for keeping you in custody, where you're reasonably suspected of having committed an offense, all I say, just behave yourself. This badmanism everywhere, it's really not working. And I would rather your life is preserved, and then we can talk about the other issues. So right now, anyone who is listening, who is contemplating escaping custody, don't bother with it.
All right, thank you very much, Minister. Dr. Amenia has a question for you. He wants to make sure he gets it in before you go.
Thank you very much. And really, I do appreciate and applaud all the intentions and the points that all the panelists have really made. My question is, just listening, what I appreciate very much is that government is making progress in terms of protecting and promoting issues around human rights. And I also hear that you have the different pieces of the offices that would help address some of the key human rights related issues in country. Now, in order to have the system operating effectively and efficiently, it is key for there to be a way of collaborating, harmonizing the efforts of all the different pieces that we have. So in your delivery, you indicated that the issue about the National Human Rights Institute, which government has great intentions to put in place, is on pause. What I want to find out is that, what are the specifics? Because now you have all the different pieces. It is about pulling all together and having one legislative kind of mandate being given to, an authority being given to that entity. So you have INDICOM, you have the public defender, you have the child advocate, and the different pieces that will also be needed to make it complete, so that Jamaica is in tune with the minimum standards of the Paris Principles. So I really want to see, do you have a timeline in terms of how we move towards setting up an institute that is so important to contribute to government vision for this country as far as human rights is concerned? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
You have another question.
All right, I hear. So are we going to take...
So
do you want to respond first,
I'm
and
not
then we'll take
able
the
to give
question?
you a timeline, no, but bear in mind we do have an office with a specific mandate for the protection of human rights, which is in the Office of the Public Defender. I'm trying to recall where exactly we are in the ministry on this matter. I'm not now recalling, but I know that a few weeks ago, we actually, in our internal stock taking with the outstanding issues, looked at it, and Madam Public Defender, it's one of the matters that we have down for a conversation with you on. But in the meantime, all Jamaicans can be assured that there is no real institutional deficit in protecting the rights. We understand the change in form and the other matters that the principles espouse, and to which a commitment has been made. But we have to ensure that all institutions that are created are appropriate for the Jamaican society, bearing in mind the international best practices. And we have had many examples where we have just gone ahead, we have adopted and adapted in a way that really has not been optimal for us. And we don't want to make the same set of mistakes again. But the commitment is that we are taking stock. That is why the Ministry of Legal and Constitutional Affairs was established, to take proper stock of the constitutional and legal infrastructure and to begin a systematic reform of it. The work is to be done over a 10-year period, and I've said it is my hope that regardless of who forms the administration of government, that this work will be given priority. Once we talk about reform, people get excited and they want it done all at once. But there is process and there is event.
I also just wanted to make a quick point as to the question of coordination and what exactly is happening, just to kind of bring to the fore as well the machinery of cabinet and the way cabinet operates to ensure that all of the ministers with portfolio responsibility are coordinating their respective agencies and organizations, that they're working in such a way that's synergistic, as well as making sure that it's with a particular goal in mind. And there's a human rights push in the government now. The mere establishment of this Ministry of Legal and Constitutional Affairs is testament of that. There's a human rights specialist in your organization focused on ensuring that the government is giving effect to and protection of human rights. So there's a lot being done in the machinery of government.
All right, thank you so very much. And just before you run away, I suspect is your question, it's her question as well. Ms. Chambers has a question for you, so hold on.
Good morning, Minister, distinguished panelists. It's not so much of a question, it's the issue of the whole human rights scheme of things as we are here embarking on. And as Mrs. Gordon Harris has pointed out, children often left behind. Nicole Chambers from Child Protection and Family Services Agency. The issue of children and protection, child protection is a fundamental issue. Recently, the Netherlands, where we're looking at all the different conventions, and children is so significant. I know from time to time we have these issues. The Child Care and Protection Act that you make reference to, Section 24, and locking up children with behavioral challenges has been there from many moons, and we've worked tirelessly to get that sorted out. And as the Minister indicated, it's a process. It's a process that we want to finalize as soon as possible with the relevant things in place. And so therefore, I'm grateful to be here this morning to be part of the process. And Ministry of Foreign Affairs do have also another aspect of human rights issues that they're looking at. And we need to embrace these issues because Jamaica is global.
Secondary or perhaps